Hi knitters, thank you so much for joining the Brioche plus Mystery Knit Along. We're here to start the second part of the knit along pattern, and we're going to do two very fun things this time. We're going to explore a brioche variation, a textural brioche stitch that is quite different from this 1x1 rib texture that we've gotten to know on the part 1. This is a variation that is kind of the brioche version of seed stitch. It is quite easy to work, I think, and it looks stunning. It's kind of a lacier version, I guess. It's a really nice texture. And the second part, which is section 3 of today's pattern, is one of my favorite ways to use brioche. We're going to revisit the syncopation, so the color changes. We're going to have the two colors of two-color brioche again showing up on both sides of the work, and we're going to add in some increases and decreases to create graphic shapes, and we're going to create triangles. Triangles are just my favorite thing to knit, I guess. They are very geometric and work well with this set of knit rows and stitches. So like those easy geometric shapes are great for knitting and great for brioche, I think. And there's going to be lots of increases and decreases in there, and if you've not done them before, there is also a photo tutorial that shows all those steps for those decreases, step-by-step photo tutorial on my website as well. That's on sosu.at/brioche. And you can look at those photo tutorials to just give you a step-by-step idea how to do it if you just want to look it up again while you knit. We're going to use 3 colors in this part of the pattern. We're going to use, so this is another one sample I started for part 1. So it's my finished part 1 for this sample here. And that's my color A and my color B in this sample. And we are not going to use color B in this sample. We're going to need color A, we're going to need color C, and we're also going to need color D. So 3 colors, 1 that we've used before and the 2 that we have not used yet. And we're also going to need 1 additional stitch marker. So 1 is already in our work, and we're going to need 1 more for this second part of the pattern. Thanks so much for sharing your projects, for chatting along in the Facebook group, and for joining the Zoom meetup. There's going to be another meetup on Sunday again. Keep posting, keep sharing. It's so great to see your projects grow. Have fun knitting. Enjoy the process. Take it slow. Don't rush through it. It should be a fun experience, so enjoy it. Take your time with it. Happy knitting. Bye bye. At the beginning of this setup row for section 2, I'm going to work with my color C, and I'm going to start where I ended with my first part, with the first section, with the broken colors A and B here, and I'm going to work a setup row on the right side with my color C. I'm going to knit the selvage stitch, and then I'm going to brioche knit the next stitch, and then make a make 1 increase. So again, turn my hand to the front and pick a loop up, and have this twisted loop on my needles to pull to tighten. And then I'm working across this entire row until I reach my last stitch, and I'm going to do it in a way that will eliminate the yarn overs but still be in this 1x1 rib texture, which means I'm going to work purl, brioche knit, purl, brioche knit to the marker which means I will not have any of those yarn overs left on my needles afterwards. See, there is no yarn overs left here, but I've still worked in this 1x1 rib texture. I've still finished that, and it's also a neat finish on the wrong side as well. When I reach the marker, I'm going to take it out. I will be using it later on, so I'm keeping it close. I am going to knit those 5 stitches here, and I'll also knit this first stitch that was part of the brioche. I'm going to knit that one as well. And then I'm going to again work over this brioche part here to eliminate all those yarn overs, but still be in this 1x1 rib texture. So I have my knit one here, and I'm going to brioche purl the next stitch. And then I'm continuing in this way with knit stitches and brioche purls. Then knit the 5 stitches from this garter stripe, and I'm going to continue like this, eliminating my yarn overs, working across the entire row until I reach the last stitch, the selvage stitch of the row. When I reach my selvage stitch, I'm going to place my marker again, and I'm going to knit the selvage stitch. This stitch is now no longer my selvage stitch, but it's going to be my center stitch from now on. So this is going to be an important stitch from now on. What happens now is I turn or tilt my work a little. I will be picking up stitches from this edge of the shawl, of this triangle, and I'm going to do this until I reach the cast on of section 1 again. And I'm just going to use my right hand needle, and I'm going to insert it through both legs of this selvage stitch here, starting with my color A. So color A is this beigey one here, and I'm just going to insert the needle through both loops. So there's both loops of this lighter colored beigey color A stitch, and there's some color B is there as well, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to insert the needle and knit this stitch kind of. So it's the pick up and knit part. I'm going to pick up another one. The next one is a different color. So this is my color B. Insert the needle through both legs of the stitch. That's the pick up. And I'm going to knit this for the pick up and knit. So I'm going to not, you don't have to be super careful when you insert the needle through both legs of this stitch. You don't have to go through just these 2 legs here. You can go through this bigger hole that is below here. It's going to be a lot easier and a lot faster. So you just want to pick up 1 stitch per selvage stitch, and a total of 109 stitches. You want to make sure that those brioche knit stitches here, you don't insert your needle through any of those. Don't go in the center of this brioche stitch, so go after that brioche knit stitch when you pick up. Otherwise, you can get creative where you insert the needle. It doesn't matter if one is a little looser and one is a little tighter. They don't have to be super neat. As you can see, my selvage stitches are also different sizes. One is larger. The color B stitch is usually larger. And I'm going to pick up 1 stitch from every selvage stitch, and then also some stitches from the cast on side. So the cast on is also part of the pickup. I almost finished the setup row of section 2. I have already picked up 105 stitches, and I have to pick up another 4. So the last stitch I picked up was from this color A stitch right here. You see that? So I need to pick up another 4. What that means is I need to be a little careful where I pick up stitches now. So that's my 106. Then I'm going to pick up another one from this cast on bit here, 107, and the 108 stitch I'm going to insert my needle right into this increase here. Can you see this is the increase here? Out of this stitch here come 3 other stitches, so I'm going to insert my needle right into the center of this increase and pick up my second to last stitch, and then I'm going to pick up one more somewhere over here. So that's going to be the new selvage stitch, and that's 109 stitches finished. So the second to last, the 108, you want to be from the center of this increase here. And then I can turn around and work my second setup row. And it starts with slipping the first stitch purlwise with yarn in front, just like we have done actually at the end of the rows. But we're just going to do this just this once here at the beginning of the row as well. And then I'm going to knit all stitches to the last stitch and slip the last stitch purlwise with yarn in front, and I'm pulling everything just to tighten it a tad, and then I turn around and I'm going to work another 2 rows in garter stitch, so knit stitches on both sides with increases in the right side. So I'm going to knit 2 stitches and a left leaning increase, make 1 left, and I'm going to knit to the center stitch and make 2 increases, 1 before and 1 after the center stitch, and I'm going to make another directional increase at the before the last 2 stitches, and then there's just knit stitches on the wrong side. So I'm just going to quickly finish that, and I'll see you after those 2 rows. So after finishing the second wrong side row and a total of 2 garter ridges with color C, I broke the yarn and I'm going to start now working with my color D. After this first right side row, that is basically the same as I've just done with color C as well, I'm going to start with the actual star of section 2, which is Pearl Brioche. But first, another right side row with increases at the beginning, the end, and the center. If you wanted to work with lifelines, you could add one after this right side row with color D. Row 4 on the wrong side is actually where the Pearl Brioche pattern starts, and I love Pearl Brioche because it's so beautiful and so simple. So this wrong side row is knit 1, slip 1 yarn over to the last stitch of the row, and we're just going to repeat knit 1, slip 1 yarn over, knit 1, slip 1 yarn over to our last stitch of the row, to the selvage stitch, and then we're going to slip the selvage stitch with yarn in front as we've done before. The actual Pearl Brioche repeat is a repeat of 2 rows, and that is row 5 on the right side and row 6 on the wrong side. And we're going to keep increasing at the beginning of the row, at the center of the row, and the end of the row on the right side. But we're going to change the increases again to those make 1 increases. And we're going to work in Pearl Brioche, starting with the knit 1 selvage stitch, And then there is going to be a brioche knit rib that's going to stay this brioche knit right after the selvage stitch. And then I'm going to make one increase, and then we're going to work in pearl brioche, and it is as simple as knit one, brioche knit one, knit one, brioche knit one, and I'm just going to repeat knits and brioche knits until I reach my stitch marker at the center of the row. Brioche knit, knit, brioche knit. And what you'll see is we're going to eliminate all those yarn overs on the right side, and we're going to bring them back again on the wrong side. But here on the right side, we're just going to get rid of all the yarn overs by working knits and brioche knits. Before the marker, I'm going to make another make one increase. Then I slip the marker, brioche knit the next stitch, my center stitch. This one is also going to stay a brioche knit column and will not be in the pearl texture. And I'm going to make another make one increase, and then I'm working again in this brioche pearl way of knitting, brioche knitting, knit one, brioche knit one, until I reach the last two stitches of this right side row. Before the last two stitches of my right side row, I'm going to make another make one increase. And this last stitch before the selvage stitch is also going to be worked as a brioche knit one, and that's also going to stay a brioche knit column. And then I just slip my last stitch purlwise with yarn in front. On the wrong side, we repeat what we've done on the last wrong side, which is knit one, slip one yarn over, knit one, slip one yarn over, until we reach the selvage stitch at the end of the row, and we're going to slip that again with yarn in front. So we start with knit one, and then we're just going to repeat slip one yarn over, knit one, slip one yarn over, knit one. And that is the full repeat of pearl brioche. And I'll show you in a bit. I'm going to repeat those two rows, this right side row and the wrong side row, row 5 and 6. And so I'm going to finish this one, and then I'm going to repeat them another 5 times. And I'll show you the results in a moment. After finishing all the repeats of the pearl brioche rows, of those one right side row and one wrong side row, the pearl brioche looks a little something like that. The pearls are those little garter bumps that bump up into like 3-dimensional up through the pattern, and it gives kind of a honeycomby structure and a really nice lacy loose texture, and it's going to blossom and bloom and be just gorgeous after blocking as well. On the wrong side, it looks like this, so it's kind of like a pearl honeycomb texture on the wrong side, or just somehow loose or garter bumps. So after finishing this repeat, I've broken my color D, and I'm going to continue now with color C again. And I'm going to continue with row 17 right side, which is basically the same as we've had in the pearl brioche. We're going to work a knit 1 selvage stitch, a brioche knit, and a make 1 increase, and then I'm going to work just like this right side pearl brioche row with knit 1, brioche knit, knit 1, brioche knit. So it's just the same as this right side pearl brioche row that we've repeated, with all the increases in at the beginning of the row, the center of the row, and the end of the row. And after this one up, we are going to be rid of all those yarn overs from the pearl brioche, and we can work, continue working another 3 rows in garter stitch until we have 2 garter bumps with color C that match what we have below here, the pearl brioche. So we're going to reflect that now after the pearl brioche section as well, and that will conclude our section 2. At the end of section 2, your knit piece should look a little something like this. There are 2 garter ridges, 4 rows in color C after the first section. Then there's this wider stripe of pearl brioche in color D, and another 2 garter ridges with color C at the end here. The brioche knit rib at the center, you can see here, it looks a little loose to the left and right, but this was going to block out. And the stitch marker is still to the right of our center stitch. Let's have a look at, this is this brioche knitter that I was talking about, that it's going to stay here at the beginning of the row. So this is not selvage stitch, the selvage stitch is 1 stitch over here. So here we have the selvage, and then right afterwards the brioche knit color. I didn't break my color C at the end of section 2 because we're going to use it again in section 3. In the next section, section 3, we're going to work in brioche again. We're going to repeat something that we've done here in the first part, which is we're going to work in brioche and in syncopated brioche, but this time there's not going to be any garter stitches in between the 2 variations of brioche. They're going to be one right after the other. So the difference again is just where to knit and purl, and it's going to be the most challenging section. So you can relax after this, but this is where you might want to put in a lifeline before starting this row. So this is going to keep you on your toes for a bit, a lot of counting, but I'm sure you can manage after finishing section 1. So we're going to start quite easily with something that sounds familiar. We're going to work 1 row, this time on the right side with our color A, and we're going to knit and slip 1 yarn over, and knit, slip 1 yarn over to the last stitch of the row without any increases. We're going to just slip the marker in between again and just knit and slip 1 yarn over with color A to the end of the row, and then slide all stitches to the other tip of the needle so we can work a second right side row, this time with color C. In this second pass of the right side row with color C, we're going to make a whole lot of increases, and all those increases are the beginnings of our color C triangles that will grow bigger and larger throughout this section. So we're going to start with a knit 1 selvage stitch, and we're going to increase right into this next stitch. Brioche knit, slip 1 yarn over, brioche knit. And then we're going to work with slip 1 yarn over and repeat brioche purl, slip one yarn over a total of 7 times. So that was once, brioche purl, slip one yarn over twice, brioche purl, slip one yarn over 3 times, 4, 5, 6, and 7. I'm going to just double check. I have my increase here, then 1 slip one yarn over, and then I have a total of 7 brioche purl, slip one yarn over. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So that's correct here. And I'm going to repeat all of this. So starting from this increase, I'm going to repeat all of this until I reach the marker. So we're going to work another increase and another slip one yarn over, and then brioche purl, slip one yarn over 7 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And if you're not sure, you can go ahead and count them again. So look for this increase here. Those are the 3 loops that make up this increase, and then 1 slip one yarn over, and then you should have another 7 slip one yarn over stitches. So another 7 color A stitches here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the 7th is right here. Okay, so that's the repeat. I'm going to work this now, starting from the increase all the way over here, until I reach the marker. So with finishing this last repeat of the increase, slip one yarn over, and then brioche purl, slip one yarn over 7 times, you should actually be finished just when you reach the stitch marker. So they should fit all in the stitches that are before the stitch marker. If they don't, you might want to go back and have a count and see if maybe you did one repeat too many or too little. So after finishing that, I'm slipping my stitch marker, and I'm going to make a 4 stitch increase into my center stitch. The 4 stitch increase works just like the 2 stitch increase. I'm going to brioche knit the stitch, leave it on my left hand needle, make a yarn over, brioche knit the same stitch again, and you can see here those 3 loops like we had in the 2 stitch increase, but I'm still going to leave it on my left hand needle and make another yarn over and brioche knit the stitch one last time, and then take it off my left hand needle. And now you see those 5 stitches that we've made out of that 1 stitch. And I'm going to now place another marker to mark the center part of the row here, but we're going to not work those triangles, but we're going to have syncopated brioche in this center part here of the row. And I'm going to mirror what I have done before the stitch marker. I'm going to mirror it afterwards, which means slip one yarn over, brioche purl, slip one yarn over 7 times, and then an increase. So that should be 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and then an increase. And I'm going to repeat that again until I reach my selvage stitch, and I'm going to slip my selvage stitch with yarn in front. Because there's so much going on with increases and decreases later in this section as well, I would highly encourage just giving the whole row a bit of a check after finishing it. So I'm just going through and having a look and a count if I've made all those increases in the right spots where they need to be. because those increases, they look so small right now, but they are the beginnings of our syncopated triangles. And all the stitches in between those increases are the base of our brioche triangles that will get smaller. So those syncopated triangles start with three stitches and they'll get bigger, and the normal brioche stitch triangles will get smaller by working decreases, and with that we'll kind of balance out the stitch count as well. And we're going to only work increases as we've done here in the second pass of the right side row, and in the future we'll be working decreases on the first pass of the right side row. So there's not going to be a mix of increases and decreases within one row. And the wrong side rows, there's kind of no change to the stitch count, but we have to work over those increases we made, and we need to make sure that they are in the right patterns, that they are in brioche or syncopated brioche. So when I'm working now on the wrong side with my color A, I'm again starting with my knit one selvage stitch. And after that, I'm already starting on a syncopated, so this is the increase, and the increase is where the syncopation is. So in this case, it means I'm starting with a slip-on yarn over and a knit, and another slip-on yarn over. So this is the part of a syncopation, and I've worked with a knit here. And I'm going to switch on over to the not syncopated rhythm, which would be brioche purls. Slip-on yarn over brioche purl, and I'm going to repeat that until I reach the next increase. So this is where you don't have to count, you just have to watch out until you reach the next increase, and that is visible as those 3 loops. I can see one coming here, so I'm working with I can already see the pearl bump here, so that should also give you a bit of an idea of that it needs to be a brioche purl stitch. But here I'm again at this increase, and the increase is part of my syncopated brioche pattern, which means I'm going to keep working in pattern, which means I had a slip-on yarn over stitch here, then I've worked one, and the next stitch is going to be a slip-on yarn over stitch. So I'm not going to change the pattern of slipping every other stitch, but I'm going to switch on to knit. So I had a purl stitch here, brioche purl stitch here, but I'm going to knit the center stitch of this increase. And I'm going to continue working with slip-on yarn over, brioche purl, slip-on yarn over, until I reach the next increase, and then I'll again knit this center stitch of the increase, and I'll do that until I reach my stitch marker. When I reach the stitch marker, I'm going to slip it to the right hand needle, and then I'm going to work over this 4-stitch increase here in the center, again in syncopated brioche. So we had a worked stitch here, so I'm continuing the pattern with a slipped stitch, and syncopated means I'm going to knit the next stitch, slip on yarn over, knit, slip on yarn over. So this part here, the center part between the stitch markers, is also going to be knit or worked in syncopated brioche, which means that color C is going to dominate here in the brioche knit columns on the right side, and our color A is going to dominate here on the wrong side. And after with the marker, I'm again continuing with brioche purl, slip on yarn over until I reach my next increase, and then I'm again going to knit this center stitch of the increase, and I'm working like that until I reach my selvage stitch at the end of the row again. Then I slide all my stitches and work a second pass of this wrong side row with my next color, On this second pass of the wrong side row 2 with KAL, I'm going to have to count again. So we are going to work a mix of brioche knit and pearl stitches with slip-on yarn over stitches in between. But we kind of have to make sure that we brioche purl and knit in the right place, and the easiest way to do that is just to count. On the second pass of row 2 on the wrong side with KAL this time, we're going to work a mix of brioche knit and pearl stitches, and the best way to make sure we have the right one of brioche knit or brioche purl is to count, and the repeat starts right after our knit 1 selvage stitch, and the repeat is brioche purl, slip 1 yarn over twice. So that was once, and I'm doing it again, brioche purl, slip 1 yarn over twice, and I'm going to brioche knit, slip 1 yarn over 7 times, brioche knit, slip 1 yarn over 7 times. So once, twice, 3 times, 4, 5, 6, 7. What I want you to kind of take note and have a look at is that we can already see that those stitches that I have just brioche knit, below the stitch on the needles, you can see brioche knit stitches forming. So those are the beginnings of this knit column. And when I'm going to switch on over to the next repeat of what I've just done, I'm continuing with brioche purl, slip on yarn over twice, and I can already see this is the purl bump of this stitch here. So this is already the indication that I need to switch my stitch from brioche knit to brioche purl. So I'm going to brioche purl, slip on yarn over twice. This one also has a purl bump here already. And then I'm going to brioche knit, slip on yarn over 7 times. And if you take a close look here, you can see the knit stitch underneath this stitch here. And this is the beginning of what will be a lot more noticeable later on as brioche knit and purl columns. That will help you kind of read the knitting, so you don't have to do all that much counting. So I'm going to not count those stitches out. I'm just going to work until I reach a stitch that has not have this clear knit stitch underneath it, without doing any counting. See, this next one doesn't have that brioche knit stitch underneath. That tells me that it's probably from this increase, and it's going to be a brioche purl stitch. Can you see that difference? So there's this little thing here, it's the purl bump, so I'm going to purl it, and then I'm going to continue. This one has this nice knit stitch underneath here, so I'm going to continue. So I'm kind of working in pattern, but the pattern is still kind of developing, and you kind of need to pay attention. So you can either count them out or have a very close look at them. Just make sure you go slowly and take your time. Don't hurry over this row. It's still the beginning of our pattern, and when we've set it up correctly and neatly, it's going to be a beautiful triangle pattern with changing color triangles. So after finishing that wrong side row, I've turned around and we're now back on the right side. And what I want you to look at is there are those increases here, and those are the beginnings, as I said, of those syncopated triangles that will get bigger by working increases. And The 15 stitches between those increases here on the base of the non-syncopated, so kind of the normal brioche triangles that will get smaller by working decreases later on. But for now, in our next right side row with color A, I'm going to work the stitches as they come. I'm going to work them as established, which means I'm going to work no increases or decreases, but I'm going to work the stitches that are set up as knit stitches, like the ones here. I'm going to work those as brioche knit stitches. All the single stitches in between I'm going to work as slip-on yarn overs. And when I get here to something that looks like this, where we have those increase part and the color C stitches, so my color C is this gray one here, and then I reach those color C stitches, I'm going to slip one yarn over those single loop stitches, and I'm going to brioche purl the stitch in between, because if you look closely it does look quite different. So we have a brioche purl stitch in the next row here and a brioche knit stitch here. So if you look closer, they look quite different. You can see this V of the knit stitch below here, and you can see the purl bump in between here. So that's my cue to brioche knit this stitch and brioche purl this stitch, and I'm going to slip one yarn over all single loop stitches. So with my next right side row with color A, I'm just going to work all of them as they are established, as they come in pattern. And I'll see you again at the beginning of the next right side row. On this second pass of the right side row with color C, we're going to work increases again, but not quite so many this time. There is going to be a 2-stitch increase at the beginning of the row, a 2-stitch increase at the end of the row, and a 4-stitch increase at the very center, but none in between. So I'm going to start my row with a knit 1 selvage stitch, and I'm going to brioche increase into the next stitch by working brioche knit, yarn over brioche knit. And then I'm working the rest of the stitches to the marker as established. I'm going to work all the single loop stitches as slip-on yarn overs, and the ones in between, every other one, I'm going to need to decide if it's going to be a brioche knit stitch or a purl stitch. This one here, if you look closely, you see the stitch below, and that is a knit stitch. Let's drag it a little to the front, a little closer. So that is part of our syncopated edge triangle here. And the syncopation means that the color C is going to be dominant in this part on the right side, and the knit stitches are going to be in color C in this row. So I'm going to brioche knit this next stitch, which creates a knit column in color C right here. The next stitch is a single one, so it's a slip-on yarn over, and the next one, it's one that I need to work. And when I decide if it's going to be a brioche knit or purl, I can see all those purl bumps underneath here that just tell me this one needs to be a brioche purl stitch. And then I work slip-on yarn over, brioche purl, always looking before I work the stitch, knit or purl. You can count according to patterns how many repeats of the slip-on yarn over brioche purl you need to work, or you can try this reading the knitting method that I highly recommend giving this a go and learning this. Reading the knitting is so important to understand your knitting better and to catch mistakes early. So I just had a brioche purl slip-on yarn over here, and then I find another one that has knit stitches here. So I'm going to brioche knit, slip-on yarn over, brioche knit, and I'll continue with slip-on yarn over brioche purl until I reach another one that looks like it should be a brioche knit, until I reach my marker. After the marker, I'm going to work with slip-on yarn over and brioche knits until I reach the center stitch. After slipping the marker, I worked a brioche knit and slip-on yarn over stitch to reach my very center stitch right here, and I'm going to work an increase, a full stitch increase into this stitch again. Brioche knit, yarn over, brioche knit, yarn over, brioche knit. This might stretch the stitch out quite a bit and it might get larger, but that is normal and shouldn't worry you too much. If it bothers you a lot, you can later distribute that extra slack of the stitch so it's not so visible. And then I continue working as I have done before, slip-on yarn over and brioche purling stitches that look like they should be purled, and brioche knitting the stitches that look like they should be knit. Obviously the pattern is a lot more thorough. And I'm going to work another 2-stitch increase into the stitch before the selvage stitch. I will then later work both wrong side rows, but I'm going to zoom over that and see you again at the beginning of the next right side row. Because the wrong side rows, again, just working the stitches as established. Make sure knit and purl are correct, but other than that there is no change that I think you can deal without me. So before starting row 5, I just want to have a quick look at what we've done so far. We can now get a better feel or better look at the syncopation. So you can see in the lighter color A here in front in the larger parts, and there are those 2 brioche knit stitches where color C is in front. Those are the beginnings of our syncopated triangles that will grow by working increases in the first and the last stitch of this triangle. And then we have those larger parts that have the color A in front, and these will get smaller, tapered to a tip by working decreases at the beginning and the end of this like normal non-syncopated triangle. So that's what we're going to do in the next row, row 5, with color A. We're going to work decreases, and I'm going to do them first in continental style and then in English style. So I'm starting with a knit one, slip-on yarn over, brioche purl, slip-on yarn over, brioche purl. This is all the syncopated part at the edge here. I can see the knit stitches are in color C, and then I'm reaching the beginning of what will be my first triangle. So this is my first non-syncopated color A triangle stitch here, and this one here is my last one, and I'm going to work a decrease over those next 3 stitches, and it's going to lean towards the center of my triangle, so it's going to lean towards the left. So this is also called a left slanting brioche decrease, and it works like this. I'm going to slip the first stitch and the yarn over knitwise, and then I'm going to knit the next 2 stitches together. So the stitch, the yarn over, and the next stitch, I'm going to knit them together. And then I'm going to pass the slipped stitch and the yarn over and off the needles. Try it again, over and off the needles. And I'll just give it a little wiggle here, and that's the left slanting decrease. I'll continue working now with the slip-on yarn over brioche knit until I reach the last 2 stitches of my brioche triangle. So before the syncopated stitch here, I'm going to work till I'll reach this last the last 2 brioche knit columns, and then I'm going to work a right slanting decrease into that one. So slip-on yarn over, brioche knits. I can see I'm working with color A, the knit columns are in A, so I'm going to brioche knit here, and I'm already here. So I've reached the last 2 color A knit columns of this part here, and I'm going to work a right slanting decrease that slants in this direction towards the tip of my little triangle here, kind of mirroring what I've done here at the beginning. And the right slanting triangle works like the right slanting decrease works like this. I'm starting again with slipping the stitch and the yarn over knitwise, and I'm going to knit the center stitch of this decrease. Then I pass the slip stitch and the yarn over the stitch and off the needles. Then I bring the stitch back to the left hand needle and pass the next stitch over and off the needles, and I'm using my finger here to make sure that I don't drop the stitch off the needle. And then I bring the stitch back to my right hand needle, and I finished my right slanting decrease. There is a separate like photo tutorial that will show you this step by step if you want to have a closer look at those decreases. I'm going to work over the syncopated part with slip-on yarn over, brioche purl, slip-on yarn over, and I'll show you another left slanting decrease. Slip 1 knitwise, knit the next 2 stitches together. So all 3 loops here, I'm going to knit all those together, and then I'm passing the slipped stitch over and off the needle. It's the left slanting one, and then I'm working in slip-on yarn over, brioche knit, slip-on yarn over until I reach the last 2 brioche knit stitches of this triangle. So it's not a triangle yet, but we're working on it. So those are my last 2 brioche knit columns and the purl stitch in between that we're going to work our right slanting decrease over. I'm starting again with slip 1 stitch, knitwise, knit the center stitch, then I'm passing the slipped stitch over and off the needles, bring my stitch to the left hand needle and pass the next stitch over and off the needle, and then I bring my stitch back to my right hand needle. And that is how you decrease in brioche. I'm switching hands quickly to show you how to do this English style. So I'm continuing after this decrease with a slip-on yarn over, brioche purl, and slip-on yarn over. I don't have to finish that yarn over because the next one is going to be my decrease, but that counts as a knit stitch, so I don't have to finish that yarn over here. So I leave my yarn in front after slipping this last stitch, and I'm working a left slanting decrease over these 2 brioche knit columns and the purl stitch in between. I'm going to slip knitwise, and I'm going to knit the next 2 stitches together. And then I'm passing the slipped stitch over and off the needles. And that is the left slanting decrease. And then I'm continuing in with the slip-on yarn over, brioche knit, again to those last 2 brioche knit columns of my non-syncopated triangle beginning. And then I work the next decrease, the right slanting decrease over those next 3 stitches. I'm starting with a slip 1 knitwise. I knit the next stitch, then I pass the slipped stitch and the yarn over and off the needles. I bring the stitch to the left hand needle and pass the next stitch and its yarn over and off the needle as well. And then I bring the stitch back to my right hand needle and I can continue working. So here I have the left slanting decrease and the right slanting decrease. After finishing this right side row with all the decreasing, I'm actually going to use this slide all the stitches to the other end of the needle. So this sliding motion, I'm not going to do it as quickly as I usually do, but I use it to double check if I have made all those decreases at the beginning and the end of all my future brioche triangles, just to make sure they're all there. And if I find that there is one missing, I would then have to think to unknit and undo the row until I reach that point. This way is obviously a little more time consuming initially, but I will save a lot of time if I actually encounter an error, because I can then fix it right away and I don't have like several rows worked across it or over it, which would be a lot more time consuming to fix. So I'm just checking if there's decreases everywhere here. Yep, looks good. All decreases are accounted for. So now we're going to work another right side row with color C. So I'm going to start my row again with a knit 1 selvage stitch and an increase. And then I work with slip 1 yarn over, brioche knit, slip 1 yarn over. So here's the stitch that is just before this decrease here, and I'm going to work an increase here, which will balance out the stitch count. So I decrease 2 stitches here, I'm increasing 2 stitches here, and the stitch count is balanced. I work in brioche purl, slip 1 yarn over across this brioche triangle section until I reach my syncopated triangle again. So this is the decrease here, and after the decrease I'm going to work this syncopated triangle, and I'm balancing out the stitch count by working an increase right here. So this increase balances out this decrease, then another slip 1 yarn over, and there's already another decrease here, so I'm going to work another increase into the next stitch. And I'm going to work this way with an additional 4 stitch increase into the center stitch. And then I'm going to repeat that, increase rows, decrease rows, until I only have two color A stitches left. So there's a lot of stitches left here, so I'm going to repeat those increases and decreases until there's only 2 color A stitches left. And then I only have one last row to work to finish part 2 and section 3 of the Brioche Plus Mystery knit along pattern. So take it slowly. I really encourage you to double check, double, triple, quadruple check that you've worked all increases and decreases. because fixing those mistakes later is going to be time consuming and also somewhat more difficult. There are ways to fix those, but fixing increases and decreases, I usually end up undoing those rows and reworking them. So that's why it's a lot easier to just go back, double check, did I make my increase here and here, here and here, here and here, and if they're all accounted for, then you don't have to worry about them anymore. Your stitch count is going to be fine, and you don't have to do a lot of repair work later on. So take the time to double, quadruple, triple check, and just take your time with this one. This is going to be like the most complicated part of the pattern. It's going to get more relaxing after this one, I promise. But it's going to be so worth it. I love triangles, I love the graphic details of them, and I'm sure you're going to love the finished result as well. After finishing row 16, the triangles are fully visible, they are almost finished. You can see the color A triangle that starts large and gets smaller, tapers down to a tip that we're going to work in the next row. And you see the color C triangle that started here with the increase and gets larger as you work. I'm going to work over this row now with color C again, and this time I'm going to kind of eliminate all my yarn overs again, and I'm going to finish off these color A triangles with a decrease here. We had those initial increases here for the color C triangles, and this final decrease here is going to balance out those initial increases as well. So it's finally giving the stitch count a balance again. And let's start this next row with color C. So this is not a brioche row, it's kind of a brioche takedown row, and I'm starting with 2 knit stitches, and then I'm making a make 1 increase. And I'm going to work over the brioche to eliminate those brioche increases. I'm going to stay in the 1x1 rib texture, which means I'm working over here with brioche purl and knit, brioche purl, knit, and I'm doing that until I reach my color A triangle, so the knit stitches, the brioche knit stitches in color A. Okay, so here we're closing now the color A triangle by working a final decrease over the next 3 stitches, and I'm using the kind of simpler, easier decrease here, which is the left slanting decrease. So I'm slipping knitwise, then I knit the next 2 stitches together, and I pass the slip stitch over to finish my left slanting decrease. And now you can see the color A triangle is closed at the tip as well. The next triangle, again, I'm working with knit, brioche purl, knit, brioche purl, and I'm going to work again to the next color A brioche knit stitches to close this next triangle, this next color A triangle as well. And I'm going to keep working like this until I reach the marker. I just finished this last decrease here before I hit the first marker, and I'm going to remove this one here, and I'm going to keep it close because I'm going to replace it in a moment. And then I'll work with knits and brioche purls until I reach the center stitch. So you can fold a pattern. It has the number of repeats you need to work, but I'm just going to work until I see this center increase. So I'm going to read the knitting and let me tell me when I'm in the right spot. So I'm getting close to the increase. You can see the increase line over here. One more. And one more knit and one more brioche purl. And this next stitch here is my center stitch. It's the center stitch of all the stitches that were in between the stitch markers, but also the center stitch of all the stitches on your needles. And I'm going to work a make one increase here. Sorry, make one, and then I'm going to place the marker that will be before the stitch, the center stitch. Then I knit the center stitch and I make another make one increase. And then I keep working, mirroring what I've done before the stitch marker on the other side. So, but I'm now just reaching the second stitch marker, and this one I will be removing completely, so I'm not going to use that anymore. So then let's do another left slanting decrease, knit, slip one knitwise, knit the next two stitches together and pass the slipped stitch over, and then just continue as we've done before. I do check every so often if I actually have done all those decreases, just to make sure that I didn't forget any. And when I'm finished with this row here, I'm going to just knit over the wrong side. I'm going to knit all stitches up to the selvage stitch at the end of the row, and I'm going to slip that selvage stitch on this following wrong side row, and I'm going to do that now, and then I'll show you the finished section 3 part 2 of the Mystery Knit Along pattern. Here it is, the finished part 2 of the pattern. We have section 2 down here with the garter stripes below and on top of this pearl brioche in color D. This is going to give you a bit of a bad idea how color D will be used throughout the pattern, so don't second guess your color D just based on this little bit here. And then we have section 3 over here with those graphic syncopated brioche triangles, and one final little garter ridge here in color C as well. I didn't cut my color C, so it's attached and waiting for the next part of the Mystery Knit Along to come out in a week. Happy knitting! Bye bye!